Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting in order. Would you please rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item on our business tonight is that we have different boards and committees that we attend outside of these regular commission meetings, and one I had been attending for a few years was the LEFT board, which is retired firefighters and police officers, and I've done that for 2 years, and Commissioner Olson has graciously, enthusiastically wanted to take that position over for an undefined period of time, and so I believe he is excited about that, and so I am going to be stepping off of that board, and he is, I hope, going to be taking that responsibility. Does that sound fair?
That is correct.
All right. So
I will be happy to do that.
Good. Thank you very much. And just kind of sharing the load here. So that was the first item on our business. Next would be our commission weekly reports, and Commissioner Moore.
Okay, on Thursday I am going to attend the Economic Development Council's annual luncheon, and then after that I am hoping that I make it to the Port of Shelton board meeting.
Okay, Commissioner Olson.
No meetings this week, just I'll be attending the EDC lunch. And then as part of a comment, I just wanted to recognize Mason County Christian School for doing a litter pickup a couple of weeks ago. The city purchased equipment for them to be able to do that. Other organizations, I would challenge other groups in high schools and junior highs to get out and do the same thing, pick a couple block area and clean it up. Helps us all out.
Very good. And tomorrow morning I'll be attending a criminal justice board meeting, and then I'm also planning to be at the EDC luncheon on Thursday. And that concludes our commission weekly reports. The next is a general public comment period. Now, we have 2 of these, but tonight we will probably have more because we are going to be going into a public hearing. So if someone would like to speak now about anything generally, we can do that. If you're reserved or you wanted to speak specifically to an item on the agenda, there will be another opportunity. So, okay. So when I read your name, you can either do a 3-minute now, or you can do it during the public hearing, or we have one more opportunity towards the end of the meeting. So if I name your name and you want to speak now, you're more than welcome to come forward. So it looks like we have Pat. Is that Vanderlei?
Vanderlei.
Mm-hmm.
Could you clarify that? I thought that Leslie said there would be 3 opportunities to speak.
There will be 3.
Oh,
This is one.
okay.
And if you want to speak during the public hearing section, that would be the second one, and then we would have a third one later on.
Okay,
So
it can be all on the same topic.
yeah, well, if you do you want to clarify that?
That's, if you want to talk about, it's up to the commission to do this.
Huh.
If you want, the rule has been in the past, if you want to talk about something general, it's not on the agenda, you can talk to the meeting. If you want to talk about something that's on the agenda, you need to talk about it a certain amount of time.
I still don't understand.
Well, we're having, about the issue you want to talk about, I believe, we're having a public hearing, and there will be a comment period during that.
I know, but that's not really a lot of time. I was under the understanding you could talk at all 3 times, different aspects of the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah, and I don't want to interrupt you. The only situation, if everyone here wanted to speak 6 or 9 minutes, it would, it could go a real long time. So if you want to do 3 minutes now and 3 minutes later, does that sound fair? You can do it, 6 minutes?
Try and get it in. Okay.
Okay, so you can speak now if you want.
Okay. Trish Vanderhay, 111 Southeast Lupin Pace. In regard to the ordinance that is coming up, number 18450214, I'd like to make some statements. There's a lot of whereas in that statement. Such things as potential impacts have been previously addressed, designed to mitigate the probable significant environment impact, adopting a SEPA plan adaptation for Salton Hills with appropriate standards and procedures will achieve efficient permit processing and promote environmental quality protection. I say that those things have not been addressed. The only proposal given in the EIS was to dig up the contaminated sediment from Goose Lake and pile it on top of the C Street landfill, cover the whole mess with an impermeable material, and put a fence around it with a warning sign. This proposal was never in the agreed order. I have a copy of it. You can go through it. You will not find it in there. Or was it either recommended or approved by the Department of Ecology? The reference to WAC 197-11-172 says 1, parentheses B, verification that the probable significant adverse environmental impacts of the projects have been adequately addressed in the EIS prepared under WAC 197-11-164 through review of an environmental checklist or other project review form as specified in WAC 197-11-315, filed with a project application. This has not been done. I want to mention that. I have a letter that I received in response to, where's my letter? Oh, here it is. From the Department of Ecology. This was done last May, and it was from Rebecca Lawson, who is the Regional Sectional Manager, Southwest Regional Office Toxic Cleanup Program. I was inquiring as to what progress had been made about the decreed order, which had originally been made in the year 2000. And one of her comments was, as you seem to be aware, there are plans to turn over Goose Lake to the City of Shelton, who is interested in providing some form of public access. Any cleanup action at Goose Lake must be consistent with any future use. These will need to be aligned when the CAP is developed. The timing for developing the CAP is at least 18 months out. I can't speak for the city, but it does seem that their planning process is out way ahead of the cleanup process. So ecology doesn't seem to be in line with what's being proposed either. I would like to say that if this goes through and the project is started before the cleanup is finished, there's a... I just want to make one statement.
Sure.
There's a lot of liability involved, and I'll refer to that in my next comment.
All right. Thank you very much.
How appropriate would be if I ran out to my car and got something. Forgot something.
Oh, well,
Forget.
I'm fairly new at this. I would imagine that could happen, but all right, let's go down this list. Next is Terry Thompson.
Good evening, Commissioners. I appeal to you tonight to not sign the Planned Action Ordinance. The state law gives you that choice. The reason why you should not sign is because environmental concerns and associated liabilities. By signing the agreement, according to state law, you must be positive that adequate environmental review has been completed on this project. This project sited in between two known hazardous waste, and this isn't written in here, so I'm going to get off track here, but I just want to comment that water knows no property lines. It goes in all directions, and there is a route that it goes. And that's kind of been ignored in this. If you have concerns that you are not certain, such as the absence of formal assessment and rankings, feasibility studies, plans, and required cleanups, do not sign. How could you be certain and not concerned with environmental concerns? The liability. Ecology stated that they have known sites are likely, and this is, quote, to affect human health or the environment, and that, quote, historic uses of this site indicated it's likely to be contaminated with hazardous substances, and that, quote, site characterization and or cleanup must be desirable prior to site alteration or development. Legacy dumping, the unknown, and possible surprises threaten human life or worsen environmental conditions. Possible years of liability issues. How will our community pay for this possible litigation of this degree? I asked ecology questions regarding the C Street landfill. I'm using their responses to demonstrate why should you not sign this. Ecology documented, and I won't get through this, I'm sure, so it'll go over, that you, quote, should know that the actual groundwater depth at the landfill, and so all this is going to be about C Street, is still unknown. There's never been a water test taken, and that is documented, and it doesn't appear that way in the EIS. The wells that the EIS compared this area to are located 140 feet lower in elevation in deeper aquifer areas. That's like comparing apples and oranges. One of them is in the middle of Highway 101. This is up on the hill. This is on the same pattern of the aquifer as Goose Lake. The Goldsboro Creek is, quote, assumed to be a hydraulic connection with and serve as a discharge point for local groundwater. That, quote, a site investigation with, okay. So I'm going to, when I speak again.
Yeah, you can speak again. Just
when I speak again, I'm going to be speaking starting where I left off, so.
That's fine. Thank you very much. All right, next is Paul. Paul. Very good, Paul. Thank you. Annette, and I'm just saying a name here, starts with an M. Do you want to speak during the public hearing? Very good. And Brandon Farrell? Yep. We'll go during the public hearing part then. Okay, and then Marilyn Volger.
I'd like to speak about the poverty task force report.
Okay, why don't we'll let you speak during that section. Is that okay? Okay, that goes through this list. Now, if anyone else wants to speak during the public hearing part, we have more names here, it looks like. And so we're just collecting signatures. So if you wanted to put your name and address on this one, then we will continue on. All right, we're going to move into a consent agenda section, and then we are going to recess out of that regular scheduled meeting into the public hearing, which it appears most people are here for. So, hang in there. I said, has everybody had an ample time to review the consent agenda? Okay, so could we please have the consent agenda read?
Consent agenda, vouchers numbered 82765 through 82867 in the amount of $321,737.65. Payroll warrants numbered 70855 through 71024 in the amount of $641,908.55. Commission meeting minutes of study session of January 27th, 2014, business meeting of February 3rd, 2014, and study session of February 10th, 2014.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
I second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. At this time, we are recessing out of our regular meeting and into an open public hearing. And this is going to be presented to us by Mr. Steve Goins.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This public hearing is to consider the planned action ordinance for the Shelton Hills Mixed-Use Development Project in conjunction with the final Environmental Impact Statement, or FEIS, that was released on January 30th. The applicant's here tonight, and we'll speak briefly to the Commission as well. I provided a briefing, I believe, last week, and some of the following comments will be summarizing or repeating those elements, but you're, I think, well aware of the project. I have a concept plan of the project here. You can see the area. It's located west of 101, approximately south of the Wallace-Nealon overpass, moving southerly to the C Street overpass, and lands west to that area in this configuration. The project is a multi-phase master planned community that would be developed in approximately a 20-year time period.
We're having a hard time hearing. We can't hear. Could the microphone be turned up?
Is it possible to turn up the microphone?
I haven't heard a word you said.
The microphone in front of you on the desk, Steve. This one.
Is that better? Is that better?
You're speaking, the phone is the recording mic.
Is this not attached to the system?
Try now.
Testing, testing, testing,
Yes.
testing. I can speak louder, I suppose. Can you hear me now?
There it goes.
Is that better?
There you go.
I might not be able to make a lot of eye contact with the commission this way. I hope that's all right.
All right.
Well, under consideration is the final impact statement for the Shelton Hills mixed-use project, as well as a planned action ordinance. I was describing the project briefly, and the board behind me is a concept plan of the area. It's generally the lands west of 101 from the Wallace-Nealon overpass south to the C Street overpass, and it's also adjacent to the airport, the Goose Lake property, and some lands that are owned by Green Diamond Resource. The project is a multi-phased master plan community that would be developed over a 20-year period. It would include a phase of commercial development, a business park, as well as a range of residential housing units, and incorporates a number of amenities, including open space and trails. The consideration tonight is to consider the planned action ordinance. This ordinance is designed to facilitate future development in a manner so that further subsequent environmental action is not required if the project that's being considered is consistent with the project that has been already evaluated. The project that's been evaluated is described in a lot of detail in the final impact statement that's been issued on January 30th and is integrated into the activity that would occur under a specific project action that would be subsequently submitted. The project itself evaluated a number of environmental concerns, earthwork, including water resources, plants and animals, environmental health, energy and lighting, aesthetics, light and glare, as well as transportation, public services, and facilities. The document includes a summary of these findings as well as specific replies to comments that were received during the comment period. And in summary, the comments seem to be generated around three topics. The issues of having Goose Lake and the C Street landfill, two contaminated sites in proximity to the project area, the location of the proposed school site, which is in the southwestern portion of the site, purple area at the bottom, ecology had some concerns with the proposed wetland mitigation that was proposed as part of the initial draft environmental impact statement. The project would require mitigation of wetlands that would be deleted as part of the development activity. There was a proposal to include a new area of about 2.8 acres in size of new wetland to be added to the wetland bank of the site. The location of that wetland mitigation was not acceptable to ecology, and that's been modified in the final EIS. The proposal actually includes two alternatives for that. One would be to extend a swath of wetland north of the current wetland, which is in this general area here, outside of the wetland buffer, and that was part of ecology's concern, is the proposed wetland mitigation site was in a functioning buffer area. So the site that was selected is a area that's already been impacted by some activities. There's a lot of invasive species, mainly Scotch broom in the area. That would be part of the mitigation. The other alternative is to propose the mitigation around a portion of the Goose Lake site, which is not in Hall Equity's ownership currently, but if that situation changes, that would be put back on the table, as it were, to allow for that as an opportunity to be further considered. In regards to the school site location, as I described in our last meeting, the school was mainly located in this area because it had to be in Zone 6 outside of the airport overlay zoning district. And that is a number of overlays that affect protection zones for the airport and its use. The airport has a flight pattern around it, and Zone 6 is essentially the flight pattern area around the airport. The most southerly portion of this site is outside of that, and the school is allowed in that area. For the project to have a different site considered, this is a possibility, but it would require the airport overlay zoning to be amended so that a school could be allowed within the Zone 6 area, and then the applicants would have to consider that and apply that to any future amendments they would like to make. As the regulations we have in place currently allow, however, this is one of the only areas on the site where a school could be placed. That was mainly the purpose behind that location. The third issue has been the proximity of Goose Lake, which is a contaminated site owned by ITT Rainier, and the city's former landfill site, which to the south of the proposed area, south of the C Street overpass. The mitigations in the environmental impact statement include provisions that consider whether those different impacted areas are completed through a closure process that would be approved by ecology, or if not, they would have provisions in place so that the public doesn't have access to those properties through fencing and through signage, as well as in the case of the C Street landfill site, to do some testing to determine the level of contaminants that may be present that have migrated from the C Street landfill onto the site, and whether there's any mitigation that's required from that. The planned action ordinance would allow development to occur moving forward that meets up with the criteria that's already been evaluated in the final impact statement. As part of the determination of approving that ordinance, the Commission needs to make some specific findings, and I'll read those. The Chapter 1 of the final environmental impact statement, or the FEIS, summarizes the probable significant adverse environmental impacts of the Shelton Hills project and outlines mitigation measures for these impacts. Chapter 1 is attached as Exhibit B to the ordinance. The Commission adopts the entire FEIS and incorporates it by reference into this ordinance. The EIS, in conjunction with development regulations applicable to the Shelton Hills project, adequately address the probable significant environmental impacts associated with development of the Shelton Hills project. That the mitigation measures set forth in the final environmental impact statement, together with the applicable development regulations, are adequate to mitigate the significant adverse impacts from development within the designated planned area. And last, that public notice and opportunity for comment was appropriately provided during the DEIS phase for this ordinance. Staff's recommending you take public comment at this time, and that you consider a first reading and placing this ordinance on the consent calendar for a subsequent meeting for consideration, second reading, and adoption.
All right, so we are now entering into a public testimony phase, and we have heard some. There's 3 here. Okay. Oh, this is to be read. All right. I got 4 lists here, so I'm sure we'll get to everybody. Why don't we let Pat and Terry continue on, because we just heard from them. If they continue on, then the flow of what they had to say would probably be more effective. So, Pat, would you like to speak another 3 minutes, please?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The application to adopt this ordinance is an attempt to get permitting to start preparation for and development of the project without the environmental issues for cleanup done or even made into a remedial cleanup plan. If the City of Shelton gives this permit desired, does it not make itself liable for any lawsuits brought on by not having these very toxic areas, Goose Lake and the C Street landfill, completely cleaned up under the direction of the Department of Ecology? Will Hall's Equity be equally liable for environmental problems? Who will have to pay for the cleanup? Will Hall's Equity actually be in charge of the development of this site throughout the whole development? Who is paying for the reconfiguration of the Walls-Nealon interchange? Who is paying for a road exit from Highway 101 to C Street? If a big box store is the first part of the development, how will traffic be handled, especially from the south? Would the parking area be as large as Walmart? And how would this affect stormwater runoff? If the work begins or is completed before any cleanup is done, will the city be liable for any health problems that workers, residents of housing, or people visiting the commercial areas? If the C Street landfill is not completely assessed before work begins, and it is found to be unsafe for anyone living or attending school anywhere near it after the project is completed, is the city liable? If the entire contents of the landfill and all the sediment of Goose Lake must be removed, who pays for this? Could this project turn into a fiasco for the city of Shelton, as the Belfair sewer has become for the county?
Thank you. Pat? Terry, did you want to finish what you were saying there?
So before I begin, I just want to read that there is a WAC 197-11660, and it is about mitigation measures or denials. And I will leave this here because it talks about a denial reason for reasonable mitigation measures are insufficient to mitigate the identified impact. And so I will leave that there so that you know that there is a reason to do this. Goldsboro Creek is, quote, assumed to be a hydraulic connection with and serves as a discharge for local groundwater. This comes from Ecology. That, quote, a site investigation with exploratory drilling would be necessary to characterize actual groundwater conditions, unquote. In addition, they stated, quote, that is unknown if leaching is occurring at the C Street landfill. It is unknown. No investigation or assessment has been made addressing this. That was from them. If it is discovered that Goldsboro Creek is hydraulically connected with and discharges points in from local groundwater without moving forward with assessments and possible cleanup required to protect the waters of this nation, we run into a risk of another huge liability called the Clean Water Act. The city and Rainier would certainly be held accountable. Regarding the safety of building schools and residences next to this landfill with possibility of only a fence and sign, Ecology responded, as with any property where public and environmental health and safety is concerned, evaluation of potential risks should be made. Actions taken would depend on the nature and the severity of those risks. They don't know the risks. The assessment has not been done, nor a feasibility study. At this point, without more political pressure, Ecology is again stalling. There's no assessment being made on the C Street dump. For 30 years, we still sit here after the first assessment was supposed to be done, still unaware of exactly how we and our waters may be at risk from this legacy dumping. I just found out within the last 24 hours that I have a document dated 4/10 that there was no water test taken at the contaminated ravine on the developmental property, in the ravine. The test taken, the boring and the location that Steve cited, and he did cite those, were for soil tests, not water tests. Comparing Love Canal, the similarities are incredible. Buried chemicals, purchase of cheap land, school built, residential in proximity. Despite several people trying to warn of hazards, development moved ahead, fluctuation of water table at 20 feet at a time during precipitation periods, moving contamination outward. Then what? Death, miscarriages, deformities, poor health, damaged chromosomes, years and years of lawsuits. The state had to buy all the homes in that area, and I figure with the number of homes here, there is a $174 million lawsuit just to do that. This was my last paragraph, so I'll finish that up. Blanket statements were made to my responses that were supposed to alleviate my concern about Goose Lake and the landfill. Fencing signs that would protect our community. To move ahead by signing this arrangement without the needed testing, assessments, and possible required cleanup would be naive and careless, the cart in front of the horse, premature. You the commissioners, You must put your foot down and say, we will not move forward with this action ordinance until Ecology and Rainier have completed all assessments and necessary cleanup to know that there are no surprises or unforeseen risks.
I'm going to go down this list, and next is Paul. Paul, did you want to speak at this time?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Following a round of applause is a hard thing to do, but I'll try. I'm concerned about items that haven't really been mentioned, but are critical in the early stages of the development. Those of us who live in the area and drive up to Neyland Boulevard know the nature of that interchange. You have one lane northbound exit. You have one lane southbound exit. We are proposing to okay an ordinance which will allow them to start earth moving and truck traffic, which is essential to the development of the shopping center area. How that interchange is to be modified has not been addressed specifically by anyone. There are simply statements made about, well, we'll have to fix the interchange. I'm not aware of any state money in the budget for next year that would accrue to us to do anything to the road there. You've got basically, as far as big trucks are concerned, 2 lanes eastbound and 1 lane westbound, because the other lane goes directly into the projected work area, but those are narrow lanes. We're talking big trucks. The C Street overpass is something that was engineered in days gone by, and I seriously doubt whether it could be modified as a highway interchange and meet the current requirements, both for weight load and for width. I'm just concerned that we're going to start something which will create a traffic jam of interesting proportions, and we'll have no money to resolve the situation. That is not in any sense something the developer intends to pay for, according to any of the paperwork I've seen. And that's about all I have to say on this for right now.
Thank you very much. Did staff, did you have any answers to some of those questions, or?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The issue of Goose Lake and the C Street land.
Okay.
This isn't working. Regarding the issues of Goose Lake and the landfill, in many respects, staff agrees with the comments in terms of the need for cleanup activity to occur. In fact, we've been working with Rainier and the Goose Lake activities for a number of years, trying to move forward a process to clean up the site. I think where we disagree is the sequence of which this work needs to occur. We believe that also this needs to be cleaned up, but we stop short of requiring that to be a necessity in advance of development of the adjacent property. We think that the mitigation measures that are included in the final ES address the scenario whether this cleanup activity commences and is completed or it doesn't commence, and we need to take other measures to protect the public while development activity occurs on the site. In terms of some of the issues with traffic, there has been a great deal of work done in years past on the interchange justification report through the WSDOT process to design proposed improvements for the interchange. We went through a very lengthy design process to come up with a configuration that's in one of the alternatives that was evaluated in the study. The developer and the city are in the process of establishing a development agreement that will in part address how the costs of these different improvements are divided up. But the EIS is very clear that at certain traffic thresholds, certain improvements need to occur. And the public has an assurance that that concurrency in those transportation improvements will occur, and that's built into the impacts that are addressed in the environmental impact statement. There's a large chapter that describes all the improvements, not just at the Wallace-Neal interchange, but I believe there was upwards of 20 different enhancements that needed to occur citywide in total to meet all of the obligations. Some of those are not all that much directed or impacted as a result of the development, and some are to a great extent, like the overpass. So I think that the staff's position is we are understanding of the desire to have these sites cleaned up, and we're continuing to make progress in that front. We believe that, however, the mitigations that we propose are adequate for allowing development to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Comment. Steve, I think the gentleman speaking before, I was one concern of mine also is this overpass more than likely will not be done before excavation starts on that site. The truck traffic created by hauling away all that fill is going to impact the traffic, if that's not what I'm thinking he was trying to say. And that's not addressed anywhere that I know of. Are they going to start, or can they start before that's addressed? The overpass and access on and off Highway 101?
There isn't an anticipation that a great deal of that material will be hauled off the site. I don't have at my fingertips the amount of material that's imported or exported here, but a great deal of the material will be used for different portions of the construction activities. It's not anticipated that it's going to be this great haul off of material. There certainly is a lot of removal of material at the interchange where the knoll, I call it, is occurring. A lot of that material will be dispersed on the site in making the site buildable for providing base for the roads. And there was also envisioned that some of the cleanup activity that would occur at Goose Lake would occur at the same time. That's long been our goal, is to try to coordinate that effort. And if there's capping material or those kinds of things need to occur at Goose Lake, we anticipate that material could be used for that as well.
We're going to move on with a public comment. Annette, could you want to speak at this time, please?
I felt that Pat and Terry's statements
Okay.
were really valuable and important. Is it possible that I could give my time to one of them?
Well, I don't know. This first time we've kind of done that, but we appreciate your comments. Brandon Farrell, I have about 10.
I think
She's still going to speak.
Oh, you're going to speak? Oh, okay. Well, yeah, just come up and speak, and sorry.
Just a couple of things, just briefly, searching the web today. The Department of Ecology stated on their website that groundwater levels in many areas of Washington State are declining faster than it can be naturally recharged. 3.5 million people use 1.5 billion gallons of water per day. And then the quote, all the fresh water in the world moves continuously in a closed loop system. No new water is being made. And just to interject a couple more quotes here, but it seems to me like there's already a huge existing problem. I'm sort of surprised that nobody's said, let's get this cleaned up 30 years ago when the problem started, that it's still existing. I don't know where that liability rests. Like, if the development doesn't go through, then what does Shelton do about, a problem? Also, I saw a map, the area around Goose Lake and Island Lake. There's this huge red area that is designated a Class 1 extremely vulnerable critical aquifer recharge area. then another figure that said critical areas, potential critical aquifer recharge areas on the City of Shelton comprehensive plan that was updated on March 2004. And then this quote, because Shelton's drinking water is supplied by groundwater sources, the ordinance, Western Washington Growth Management Hearing Board, requires the city to designate and protect critical aquifer recharge areas used for drinking water. Just a couple things
All right.
to throw out.
Thank you for your comments. Next, Brandon Farrell.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Good evening, Mayor and fellow commissioners. I'm Brandon Farrell with Hall Equities Group. And first I want to say thanks to Steve Goins for all the work and the city staff that's participated in this document. It's been at least 3 to 5 years of work that has gone into this. It's a very comprehensive and good document. We feel really good about it, and I think Steve does. And I know the focus has been on the Goose Lake and the C Street dump, and those are important issues. And I want to sit here and say that we agree with everything that's being said tonight, that Goose Lake needs to be addressed. The C Street dump needs to be addressed. We are actively working with Rainier and the Department of Ecology for the past 4 or 5 years, and as recently as last week I was communicating with Rainier about Goose Lake. I think everybody's on board to address this issue right now. It's taken a long time, but I'd like to make the point that this project here is a very large master plan project with a good environmental document, and I'd like to encourage the public to see that as a good situation to push forward the cleanup of Goose Lake, because we're actually here to help with that. We want to participate in it, and I believe we have the ability to bring Rainier and Department of Ecology to the table and actually get a new agreed order in place with a cleanup action plan that we can all support, and I think that the public would support. And other than that, I just want everyone to know that we're here. We see this as a responsible development project for us, that we're going to be here for the long haul, and we see Goose Lake in particular as an amenity to this housing development. We certainly don't want to be selling houses in the future that has a cloud over it. So we would like to see this mitigated immediately. The sooner the better. So, but I'm here for any questions if anyone wants to talk after the meeting, or if any questions right now. And as far as timing goes, I know some people were asking me about timing. Our plan is to actually try to start construction on the dirt movement this year, possibly mid to late year. We'd like to start grading the commercial development, and hopefully we could start construction on buildings sometime next year.
All right, now I think we'll hold off the questions to you personally at the moment, because then the meeting would go into possibly just a question and answer thing. So let's let people address the questions if they want to come up and speak during their time. Were you done with your time?
Yep.
I got a question for Brandon.
Sure.
Yep.
Brandon, has it been mapped yet on Hall's property where exactly the cleanup sites are that are on your property?
Yes, there's actually one spot, and Steve can probably speak better to this exactly where it is, but there is a minor little, I guess, hit, or what do you want to call it?
Yeah, there's a area of the site that extends. It's a ravine that extends off of the ITT Rainier site onto the Hall Equities development site, where there's been some testing, and it's part of the impacted zone that's been identified in the remedial investigation on Goose Lake that's been done to date.
On the master plan, where it shows the different developments, what part of that is it? I've never actually seen it designated on any of the maps.
In the
how extensive it is.
In the draft EIS document 3.4.1 identifies the study area that ecology has focused on, and I can walk this up to you and show it to you, but it includes this ravine I'm describing, and you can see the portion that extends onto Hall Equities property.
Oh, just right there. Not the whole red thing, that's Goose Lake, so the ravines here. Okay.
All of this is included in the study area. This is the extent of the whole property here, so it's this portion.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Brandon, why don't you sit down, and if somebody wants to talk to you later, they can.
Okay, I had one more thought here too, is Steve touched on the school site. I know some people asked me about that last time I was here. For us, we feel very strongly that a school is important to this project. And as Steve mentioned, the location of that school is located there because it's outside the airport overlay zone. So we'd be flexible in moving it somewhere else on the project. Right now we can't. It's the only place we can put it. But going forward in the future, if the city desired to move that somewhere more internal, we'd actually prefer that. So that'd be an option we'd look at.
All right.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. Next is, okay, let's set this aside. Yeah, Marilyn, did you want to speak now?
I would like to.
Okay, you can come up because your name was on the list.
I find I have to make a comment about Goose Lake. I appreciate your comments. I'm not opposed to development. I think this whole project is really very positive for Shelton, but I think fences are easier to put up than to take down. And I'm concerned that if you put a fence around it and call it inaccessible, it will lose priority. So before you vote on this, I want you to look at that picture. From the very beginning, we've seen the Shelton Hills project, this lovely blue spot up in the upper right-hand corner, and green grass around it, and if you look close enough, maybe a walking path. Right now, I want you to imagine a more honest depiction. I want you to paint that blue spot black, and I want you to put a bright white skull and crossbones in the middle of it. And I want you to take a black pen and ink, and I want you to draw a fence around it, maybe with razor wire on the top. And then I want you to imagine what people's responses would be who might be considering building a home in that area. So before you vote on it, imagine that image of.
Thank you. Next is, let's see, why don't we go, is Maria? Is that Marie? And I'm sorry, the last name is LaRock? Is that right?
Oh, Gary, I'm confused.
Sure, come on up.
Now I'm confused. I'm here because I was ready to have a shopping center, you know. Yeah. I don't come to the meetings, but I still have to go to Olympia. And I would like to stay here more and spend my money here more than in Olympia or Centralia, even Aberdeen. They got everything. What do we got? Come on, I don't know about all the problems that we're having. Is new to me. I wasn't born here, but I've been here a good many years. But anyway, good luck, you guys. I'm waiting for a shopping center, okay?
Okay.
A shopping center. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And I'm going to play bingo.
Okay. Hey. All right, moving right. Tom Davis, did you want to speak at this time?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Tom Davis. Of all the acts I have to follow, I would not have chosen that one because it's perfect. We all agree. First of all, as most people know, I've been a big supporter of this project. I think it's a game changer. I think it's a great idea. I think it's beneficial for the county and certainly Shelton in particular, bringing jobs and generating revenue. But sometimes good ideas become bad ideas if they're not planned well. Now, you have two builders here on the board. and I've built a few homes myself. You have to ask yourself, if you were personally liable for any damages that occurred from an adjacent lot to a home that you were planning to build, would you build it? I certainly wouldn't. I don't think it's a very good bet, because the damages are unknown. The contaminants are unknown. The leaching is unknown. The extent is unknown. You have absolutely no idea what you're building next to. It makes very little sense from a common sense point of view. And I think that's basically the question, and that's what we have to boil this down to. We all agree, there's no one in this room that does not agree that Goose Lake and the C Street dump need to be cleaned up. But the only thing we disagree on is when. Well, this is the optimum time to clean it up. It will never be a better time to clean it up, because like the lady who spoke a couple of speakers ago had said, once this is built, that priority is going to drop down. It's going to go down to the back burner. There's going to be a lot of problems associated with it, but it won't be addressed. This is the time to address it. First you do the cleanup, then you do the building. Everybody knows that. We all agree to that. So it's a political decision that you're making. You're here to protect us. Now I'd like to refer to this ordinance 1845-0214 on page number 2 at the bottom in the long list of whereas. It says, the City Commission finds that adopting this ordinance is in the public interest and will advance the public health, safety, and welfare? I don't think so. Not as currently proposed. If you want to be forthcoming, this is what you need to replace that with. It needs to say, whereas the City Commission is aware of the existence of 2 sites adjacent to and abutting the north and south boundaries of the proposed development, and whereas these sites are known to the City Commission to contain contaminants the state of Washington has deemed unsafe to humans, and whereas the extent, concentrations, and reach of these contaminants is unknown, now therefore an authority vested in the City Commission and not subject to referendum, we find approval of this ordinance is in the public interest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you. We're getting close to the end of the list. I have 3 more people I believe would like to speak to this, and one is Constance. It's got Constance.
My name is Constance Ibsen, and I'm here to urge a vote of no action on this development and the planned action development ordinance that is attached. For me, there is no adequate rationale for the proposed project. The FEIS does not lend itself to the kind of examination of the projects and its alternatives required under law. To me, both the DES and the FEIS are superficially represent the required subject matter. The FEIS fails to provide any meaningful cost-benefit, including liability, analysis of the proposed project and its alternatives. This FEIS should specify and analyze the relative economic cost and benefits in greater detail so that the inefficiency of expending taxpayer dollars and funds may be more clearly seen for both alternative 1 and 2. Then the no action alternative would emerge as the only sensible alternative for both this landowner, the citizens, and the taxpayers. Hall Equities plans to phase in this project. They propose to start with the big box retail. So let Hall's Equities start with submitting permit applications for those retail outlets. The cumulative impacts are missing. The FEIS needs to examine a full range of possible impacts and not gloss over the cumulative impacts of the proposal. If approved, the Shelton Hills Hall Equities project will serve as a catalyst for a multitude of small and large decisions with consequences far greater than are acknowledged in the FEIS. Goodness, the impact of the existing downtown core appears to be written off with its free enterprise response. Except this is not going to be free. The taxpayers are going to be subsidizing this development and mitigation impacts in perpetuity.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, good. Next is, it looks like to me, Doug Sand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm not usually before your commission because I don't follow the issues as carefully as I should. I served in the Washington State Legislature for a number of years representing this district. And when I did that, I did so because I believed that we ought to be sure we do the right thing for our people in this district. And as a result of that, I became interested in what's occurring here. Each time there's an election for a commissioner, that election generally hinges on the words positive change. We're going to do things better. I think it's essential that we keep that in mind. I'm not qualified to speak about the merits of this. I was here to the meeting we had before, and Steve went over it very carefully about what we were doing, so I had some concept of it. But I am qualified to speak, I think, about the merits of doing what needs to be done on behalf of this district. Never in my wildest imagination as a legislator would I allow, and I was in position to stop some of those things at that time, would I allow something to happen that speaks of Dick Cheney when he said we're going to Iraq. Well, we have known unknowns, but also we have unknown unknowns. Great Scott. We have unknown unknowns, and yet we're going to step ahead and commit this district. Now, somebody said, I really think about the merits of this action you're going to take on behalf of my children. I'm 85 years old. I'm not going to be around for the long haul, but my grandchildren are, and I think they ought to enjoy this community in which I've lived for over half a century as much as I have. And it's up to you to see that that happens. We don't buy into something we don't even know about, the unknown unknowns. And that's not suggesting to you that I think the concepts and the work that's gone into this doesn't have merit. We've got a lot of good ideas here. But one of the bad ideas is you take the unknown unknowns and pre-approve something you don't even know about. Don't do that. That's not moral.
All right, I have another name here, and that's Toby Kevin.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, staff. I'm Toby Kevin, 709 East Terrace View Drive. I apologize in advance that I don't have the eloquence of the 3 or 4 people who preceded me. They are truly eloquent. I have first a question and then I guess another question. First off, to echo what Tom said, I'm a fairly strong supporter of this project for all the good reasons put forth. I hope it goes ahead. Of all the things that have been said and written, the thing which concerns me the most, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there hasn't been straightforward testing of the water impact, specifically of the C Street dump. I don't know if Goose Lake impacts on it at all. But it strikes me as a degreed scientist that it's a straightforward thing. And I hope I'm wrong, but I think the evidence shows that hasn't been done. I mean, it's a very straightforward A, therefore B thing. And I would have to echo what my friend Doug Sand said. To go forward with an approval without being able to answer a question affirmatively about the safety of the water supply is at best immoral. So I urge you to close that gap before taking action. The other thing that I allude to is been a myriad of questions raised tonight with respect to, first off, I have to admire Steve and the staff because I know this has been a lot of work. That said, though, there have been a bunch of questions and allegations raised this evening. Clearly, there's a lot of community interest. I'm curious to know about process or procedure of how the Commission and the staff would propose to address these things and make that known to the public before the critical vote that would take place in 3 or 4 weeks. Perhaps somebody can address that this evening. If not, then my question is, how would that be addressed and how would you communicate that to the community? That's the end of my remarks.
Thank you. What I would like to ask is of staff, basically on the comments on the water and testing, exactly what effect does that have to do with this project, basically, and what can we answer some of those questions now? Because I'm a little confused about no testing, some testing, you know, and exactly what does that have to do with this particular project?
The sites that are contaminated, that are raising the concern, are predominantly off-site, and that's really the key issue here. The cleanup activities that we're seeking are on properties that largely are not part of what Shelton Hills is contemplating to be developed. In particular with Goose Lake, we do have more information on the soil and the groundwater and its movement around that area. There's been a fair amount of testing done, and in fact, as we looked at earlier, Ecology has identified the area where they feel there is a soil contamination issue and has identified that very specifically. And a portion of that does in fact go on the Hall Equities property. The mitigations propose an interim action that would remove the soil from that area and haul it off the site. And that would be required to be completed in advance of a development in that area, and that is included in the mitigation measures. In terms of these other activities, particularly with the landfill, the impact of the city landfill is not a result of any activity on the Shelton Hills site, nor does developing the Shelton Hills site change the outcome of what's happening underground with that water. The needs that have to occur to mitigate that on the city landfill site are a separate action. As well as with the Goose Lake property, those will have a subsequent environmental review. Ecology will ultimately agree on an appropriate action to deal with those, but they aren't something that's a result or a cause that is something that should be mitigated as part of development activity on the Shelton Hills site.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Now, that's all the names that I had. If there's anybody else would like to speak towards this issue, please come up. You assign your name and your address right here, and we'd be happy to hear from you. So, right there. A name and an address, please. Sir, you could actually start speaking right now if you'd like to. Go ahead. You can be the first one. You can speak now. It's all right. They're just filling this out.
Okay. Right now.
Yeah.
May it please the Commission, my name is Jacob Rufer. I do not live in the city of Shelton. However, I do most of my shopping here, a variety of places. I'm very concerned about this proposal, but I'm going to speak only to a procedural matter very briefly, and it's going to be a question. I noticed that this is a first reading, which presupposes by phraseology that there must be a second reading. And what will happen at the second reading is my question.
Well, I turn this question over to our city administrator because he is more familiar with Robert's Rules of Orders than I, and he would probably be able to answer that for you.
Commission rules say that unless there's an emergency, that you'll have a first reading, and then at the second reading, the ordinance would be adopted. Of course, the commission can do other than that. They can have additional readings if they so choose.
I understand that you said that adoption will occur at the second reading?
Normal circumstances, yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any predisposal to adopt it?
I'm not following your question.
Well, you can allay that question then. In any event, will you tell me when the second reading will occur?
If tonight we pass a first reading, the second reading, I believe, will be at our next meeting. So that'll be 1 week from last night, next Monday.
Thank you very much.
Is that your process? What have you got laid out for additional meetings?
Having the second reading as part of the agenda for the 24th was our proposal, and that was under consideration. There is not a deadline associated with that date, but that would help with giving us some certainty and moving forward.
Okay, so that's what the plan is on that. Next is, I'm sorry, I can't read your handwriting, but I'll let you speak next.
My name's Wilson Durham. I lived in Shelton 3 years after retiring from the real estate business. I've heard the comments here, and they concern me a lot, especially the liability the city would have. I realize that the developer, he's worked, the developers, the law firms, whatnot, they're vested in this thing. They've been struggling with it 4 or 5 years to make it work. I understand people in planning have put a lot of work into it, like other people have said. And there's this urgency to get on with it, no matter what. Well, that would be a phenomenal legal mistake. I believe that the liability you folks are facing, not to mention the developer, now they can pack up and go down to the Cayman Islands, okay? But you've got to stay here and run the city and face the lawsuits. Until the property is cleaned up, water moves. I've heard words like anticipate, envision. No, 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 no. These things are infrastructure intense, financing intense. The developer's going to move on. He's going to roll on because he's paying interest on a construction loan. So he's got a schedule to meet, and he's going to put on the back burner all this expensive stuff associated with environmental remediation. Everything I've heard here, cart before the horse. Every bit cart before the horse. I know some attorneys, maybe I can get a referral fee out of this, you know? Real estate attorneys, good ones. And class action lawsuits? I tell you what, I wouldn't touch this thing till all the environmental issues are done. I can't believe what I'm hearing here tonight. I've been in the business 25 years. I would not touch it till the environmental things are signed, sealed, and delivered by the developer. You're making a mistake.
Can I ask you one question? Have you read it? Have you read that environmental impact statement? Have you read it?
I'm going to.
But you haven't read it.
I'm just telling you that after 25 years in the business.
Have you read it?
I've heard comments, and just the comments by the gentleman who's worked on it. Envision, anticipate, no. Envision, anticipate. You get things done first.
Okay.
So anyhow, that's my comment. I am going to read it. And as a matter of fact, I'll get some feedback from people I've worked in the real estate business with to see what they think, you know? Because from my experience in development, this is very risky at this point in time until you get the environmental things fixed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. My name is Ken Van Buskirk. I live in Belfair, where the infamous Belfair sewer is being built. And I'm also very concerned about critical aquifer recharge areas. And I know there's one in the vicinity here. I think it would be good to understand what that is. If a contaminant gets into the water table, it can travel up to a mile in 9 months. That's a long ways. I haven't read this EIS. I did read the EIS for Belfair, and I think for the sewer in Belfair, and I think if you read the papers, you'll realize that when they started constructing the line, the sewer line, they ran into a bunch of contaminated soil. They should have known it was there. They didn't ask the community. They didn't do a real good job in some of those identifying those potential areas. So I would just ask you to, EISs are made to be amended. Perhaps defer the decision on this until you have a chance to investigate some of these concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's all the names that I had on my list. Yes, sir, would you like to speak? Absolutely.
So I was glad to hear a lot of the comments tonight, and I want to reiterate that that I think a lot of people that have spoken have a lot of unknowns and a lot of question marks that actually are answered in the documents that we have in place. And I would encourage everyone to actually read through thoroughly all the documents, and the concept that we're putting forth here that we've worked for many years with the city on is a master plan that actually has great development guidelines for the next 20 years for this project. And so there's a concern about many of the unknowns. Included in those unknowns is also in that document is the addressing the cleanup of Goose Lake. And this isn't putting the cart before the horse. This is just part of the process. And this document that you guys are approving is not allowing us to build anything. We're not getting construction permits. This is simply putting forth the mechanism to get to the next step to get this project developed the right way, which includes the cleanup of Goose Lake. We are fully contemplating that a cleanup of Goose Lake will happen right up front. We do not want to start construction on homes before the cleanup is done. We've been working for many years on this. If we could do it quicker, we would. So I just would like to reiterate that we're not planning to build a bunch of homes before this is done. We expect fully that the lake will be cleaned up and that this will be a amenity to the community and safe. So we're in complete harmony with the city's concerns on that. So.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to make another public comment at this time? So, Terry, you would like to go for 6 minutes?
Oh, sorry.
You can.
All I want to say is that many of us have read the whole document, and many of us have spent the last year and a half of our lives, night and day, over ecology in the office over there, taking notes, making copies, making phone calls, meeting with people, and we have real information, and we have real tests and real not. So the things that I put in there, I went to try to write what I was going to read tonight, and I'm like, it's all in there. And I felt like it's not being dealt with, because the whole thing boils down to is the known things in Goose Lake, and I'll just say, the things that are in there right now, copper, PCBs, total dioxin and furans, and these are exceedance of groundwater cleanup levels. And when you have that, and then you fail, I mean, you can say in this area, it's not contaminated. The ravine is in this area. I'm going to just write, this man wrote to me, I'm not going to disclose a name, but I got this week. I worked at Rainier for 4 summers while in college. All the old timers told stories of all the odd and dangerous things they dumped up there in the late 40s and 50s. It is well known that they trucked many truckloads a week of the sulfite liquor used to cook wood chips into pulp. But the old timers told of all the other stuff informally dumped there as well. Did the transformer spring a leak? Clean it up and dump the PCB-based cooling oil up in the airport. Got some carbon tet surplus in your needs? Dump it at the airport. You get the idea. We can't. It's kind of like we have dreams for our community. Every one of us here. I've lived here my whole life. My family has. You all do. I want stores. I love to shop. Let's start on something clean. Let's make it a community effort to do that. I don't have a problem with the development. I have a problem with starting and putting it in the wrong place where you have potential for people to be sick and die, okay? So the liability just isn't so, and yes, we read the information, so.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Yes, Pat, do you want to speak again? Here's how we can break these rules there. If you can make it brief, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just want to say, I have, as Terry has said, read all of this stuff. In fact, my house looks like a paper mill exploded with all the information. One thing I'd like to say is that originally, the original SEPA, there was no mention of that street dump landfill. And Terry brought it up, and it was denied that it was there until she produced a map showing it on there. And then it was, oh yes, I guess there is something there. And one other thing, there is dioxin that's been put in there. Just for your information, the level of toxicity for one form of dioxin, 2348 TCDD, for drinking water is 0.30 points per quadrillion. Quadrillion is 1,000 times a trillion. And we don't know if that's in there. We know there's dioxin in there, but there's no idea of how much or if it is that very toxic part. That's all I wanted to add.
All right, thank you. One other comment, and I'd like to cut it off at this time. Is that Laurel? Yeah, please.
Good evening, thank you. I'm just motivated to speak after listening to some of the other comments. My family, we had close family friends. They had 4 children. These 4 children, the oldest 2, were toddlers who lived on Love Canal, a very, very polluted Superfund site. And what I would like to say is, you know, those 2, when they became young adults, you know, this did not happen. The effects of living in this pollution, playing in their backyard as toddlers, did not show up until they were young adults. When they were young adults, they both got very ill. They both died before their parents. Their parents are both still alive. So what I'm saying is, effects of this pollution left, you know, in the ground, in the water, can have, you know, effects can happen decades later and be very unpleasant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that ends the public comment period, and now we as commissioners will probably respond and say what we are thinking at this time. So I would invite my fellow commissioners, if they have some comments that they would like to speak concerning all of your comments, now would be the opportunity for that.
Okay. It's kind of difficult. There is so much passion, and there's no...
Well, we will work on that. Sometimes this helps here.
All right, can you hear me? All right. There is so much passion involved in this, and there are very many facts. And the concern that we all have is the health and safety of our community. The question always comes up, or has come up recently, as far as why have we waited 30 years to take care of this? Well, you know, we're taking care of it now, and I hope that it's going to be a quick cleanup, and I know that we will have the support of the community in getting that cleaned up. We haven't, the 3 of us have not been sitting here for 30 years, but we're sitting here now, and hoping that we can push this through with the help of the community. One thing that is really difficult in this, because there are the facts and there is the passion, is the fact that the toxic areas are not contained completely on the property that we're talking about. And we're somewhat limited. We can't make decisions based on the adjacent properties in this case, and it's really difficult. And I have read all of the documents several times. So quite honestly, I am not certain how much we can hold back this decision. One thing that I do want to say is that the planned action ordinance isn't a new thing. This isn't the only place that happens. I've done a lot of research. The city of Bellingham has used it extensively for some cleanup areas that they have worked on recently. I have a couple questions for staff too. I'm assuming that if additional contamination is found on the site, that negates the agreement and would cause a new environmental study.
Regarding the Goose Lake site, the process in this case is to complete the remedial investigation, which is still underway, and then to develop a feasibility study that would consider different alternative methods to clean up the site. As I know it today, Ecology has landed on what they believe is the impacted area, and that's in the exhibit I showed you earlier. They are requesting for additional water monitoring. I think the purpose of that is to determine where water might be moving and to evaluate the impacts downstream from primarily the landfill site. Their process would culminate in a cleanup action plan, which would utilize the feasibility study to build on that to develop a plan which would be agreed upon by the partners. In this case, it's Hall Equities, who's a partner in the cleanup activity, as well as ITT Rainier. It's too premature on the C Street site to determine what kind of plan might be in place. The first phase is to have a site hazard assessment completed. Ecology is in the process of getting that work funded and a contractor in place to commence that work. Based on what that tells us, we would be better able to answer what kind of approaches might be considered. And as I stated earlier, the concern that staff had was that absent this amount of work that the site assessment would provide and the information it would give us, to have some sort of mechanism to test the soil on the southern portion of the Hall Equities property to see if some of the contaminants may have migrated up on the site would happen in advance of construction activities. Depending on what that tells us would determine what kind of response we would need to make, but we would rely on Ecology to give us those recommendations and work through what kind of mitigation that would require. And without the exact information, we can't predict what that might be.
And that's a separate process from this EIS.
The cleanup activity that would occur at Goose Lake and on the city landfill site are separate activities. How any sort of remediation might occur on the C Street or the southerly portion of the Hall site would be determined by what they find when they test the soil.
So, so even if we were to approve this, then it could be amended by any further findings?
The findings aren't conclusive, and there's a number of areas where this would apply. In this case, it would be what kind of activities would need to occur to remediate potential contamination on the site. I'm trying to think of another example of how that might work. A common one, for instance, is if you encounter some sort of archaeological elements in the soil as you're digging, whether that be man-made or fossils or other things, there's a protocol that comes into play at that point that would determine how you deal with that, and you can't predetermine how to deal with it because you don't know what you might find there. Those are typically evaluated by the state and others, and an evaluation by the experts is made as to how to take next measures. Those kind of activities are not uncommon, particularly when you're moving a lot of earth, to have those kind of measures in place.
Okay, and my next question is, as far as the CARA mapping and the protection of the cars, what's being done, or how close are we to having those mapped so that we can adequately address the cars during the construction phase?
A portion of the site is in what's already been identified as a critical aquifer recharge area, and the development would have to meet all of our adopted criteria for protecting the critical aquifer recharge area that we have in place now. That would be true for any development that would occur in that area. The mapping process would possibly alter, and I think the desired outcome would be to make consistent the maps that the county has adopted with the maps that the city has adopted. The city maps have indicated a greater portion of these mapped areas are extremely critical, more so than the counties have. So in that regard, the city's regulations seem to be more conservative in terms of the sensitivity of the resource and the means to protect that. The mapping process wasn't intended to expand or contract the critical aquifer recharge areas as much as it was to make a positive identification based on the studies that were done, and to have that be digitized as a better tool to utilize it in the future.
That would also affect allowed uses, right?
That's correct, particularly in the business park where you might have some industrial activities that might be the source of some point contamination. There are limitations as to the type of uses that could occur there, as well as certain uses would have to follow certain procedural processes, such as double containment tanks or those kinds of things, to be allowed in that area. And some uses are just not allowed outright.
Okay, I'm finished for right now.
All right.
My comments are that I too am very worried environmentally on the site. I think all of us up here, have the best interests of Shelton and the residents. And I do believe that the staff working with various state agencies have used the best science as possible to arrive at their conclusions. And with enough watchdog agencies in place, I believe this project can work with enough oversight over it. And getting on to the legal implications that people keep talking about and the liability, the federal EPA has consistently come down on the side of the taxpayers and making the polluter clean it up and be liable for it. So I'm not real sure, and I would like to get legal involved a little bit as far as what the city's liability is and isn't in adopting this. Because, like I say, the federal EPA is very consistent in that they have made the polluter pay the cost. And I think our best chance, like Mr. Farrell mentioned, that this is our best chance, and they can perhaps be our best ally in getting the Department of Ecology and ITT Rainier on page with this to get this cleaned up. That's all I'm going to say on that side of it. The other part I want to talk about is the development agreement that is not in place yet. And I just wonder if that's going to be a tool for us to use to help remediate some of these things, as far as not only traffic impact, school impact, when does that come about? When do we get the developer agreement in place, and what does that take?
That is likely the next step in the process for us. We would begin to coordinate with the developer over what elements the agreement needs to include. And typically, the transportation improvements are the most thorny issue. That's where you're sharing the costs. These are public improvements that the city is responsible for, as well as the developer whose project is causing additional traffic on our streets to address. And we can mutually agree on any number of other issues that the development agreement needs to include. And certainly we'll have on the table how to address some of these off-site issues, such as the C Street landfill and the mitigation measures that are included in the finally environmental impact statement, and how those costs are going to be addressed. Again, the underlying concurrency requirements give us a lot of protection in terms of ensuring that elements of the project that would impact our traffic and other aspects of impacts, those collective impacts are addressed as development would occur, and they're not put off until the development happens, and then after the fact trying to get intersections updated or roads widened. Those happen at the same time, essentially. And the environmental impact statement requires that, and our development agreement would underscore that with a more detailed approach on how the costs are being shared.
So if we approve this EIS before the development agreement, do we have any, what if something comes up that's not mutually agreeable? Does that affect their ability to continue with the project, even because we've already given them permission for the EISs?
I suppose in the near term, there might be some debate over how things are going to get paid for. At the end of the day, the city would have to take a position on what are required improvements, and obviously our goal is to come up to an agreement. Without a developer agreement, I'm not sure how these large-scale transportation improvements could be addressed if the approach as the final impact statement describes them. It's a more cumbersome approach to address all the impacts. As an example, as I stated, some of the intersections in the city will have an incremental impact in effect because of additional traffic the retailers and the new housing would impose on the city. It's identified a percentage of that traffic which the development would be responsible for. That may be a very low percentage. So as you're contemplating how to remedy that, it's a lot easier to build the improvements and fund those improvements over time, rather than ask someone to fund a portion of an improvement that the city then is responsible for coming up with the balance of that. The developer could choose to contribute those incremental chunks of money, portions of the improvement costs, as a mechanism to move forward. And I believe by and large that's not in the interest of the city, because it would be a more difficult process to actually construct many of those needed improvements. It would, our preferred approach is to develop a mechanism where we can identify who is building certain improvements and funding those, and share those costs and share those developments, with the understanding that we have a timeline of development that those need to match up with.
And some of the language in here, it seemed like they were going to be given credit for some of the impact fees. In example, like the school site, how does that mitigate it? If they get credit for that, then that leaves us with not enough funding for the infrastructure off-site. Am I reading that right? That they're going to get credits for certain impact fees?
There is commonly a credit for costs that are borne upon a developer. When a large infrastructure element like the overpass is constructed, the cost of construction is offset by the impact fees those retailers would bring in, and that's a complex mathematical problem. But the objective is to have fairness in the process and to identify and align the improvements with the activities that are being permitted along the way. The amount of money that it takes to fund all of our capital improvement projects, I think, is north of $20 million. Does that sound right? For our entire capital facilities project list?
The transportation side. Yeah, it's on that order of magnitude.
Those in total are a shared responsibility between any development that might occur and the city. But it's not a short-term effort to complete all those projects. It's a long-term vision. I'm hoping I'm kind of arriving at your answer here. It's not simple just to necessarily want to charge a fee and move on. Sometimes that is the cleanest process, but in these transportation improvements, sometimes that process doesn't result in the improvements you're seeking. That having this development agreement is one of the values of that is being able to arrive at a process that not just pays for these improvements and delineates that share of cost, but actually gets them in place. An example of where that works well is with your water and sewer connection charges. We have a complex model that we've developed that evaluates what the share of sort of buying into the system and improving the system incrementally to address that impact over a large scale can be done. If we had thousands of homes built over this 20-year horizon, I can assure you that the general facilities charges we have in place for water and sewer will fund significant improvements. And the same is true with these other elements. It's just harder to see how that works and to make sure that they align with the need. And that's where the transportation side of this often gets very complex.
I guess my final comment and thought is back on the environmental side. I see Commissioner Jeffries in the audience here, and as I read through the EIS, I was reminded of the letter, or the statement she gave at the open house, was that don't underestimate the power of your own voice. I know Terry and Pat have done a great job of getting on ecology, but I think everybody out here needs to do that. I myself have contacted ecology and used what little power I have, but at least to let them know that we're trying to move this along. I've talked to Commissioners or Senator Sheldon's, Haig, and McEwen, and offered them the same advice that, can they do anything to help us out here? So I think that's our best bet is to put pressure on them. We have to do it as a community, and we all want the same thing. We want the development, but we need it to be clean and responsible. So for now, that's all I want to say.
We don't generally at commission meetings take public testimonies or comments for questions, but I guess if it was one question and you had a question for Mr. Olson, then we will allow that to try and be polite to you and the system. So if you have a quick question.
Yeah, my only question is kind of a statement of the question, but we're concerned about the Department of Ecology moving along, right? And some of their sluggishness has to do with their funding. My question would be the funding it would take the developer to solve any or all of the unknown environmental issues. It's a matter of budget and infrastructure costs. So planning said it'd be, $10 or $20 million for these transportation costs. But what if the environmental costs, the environmental budget, we turn up $10 million worth of work that needs to be done? Does the developer, he should post a $10 million bond to be sure this gets done. Otherwise, he's going to put it on the back burner, and he's not going to be able to share transportation costs. So again, unknowns have unknown costs. Unknowns have unknown costs. We've got to define the costs that the developer to cure these things. You're moving ahead without defining the environmental costs.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. It's always hard to be polite and have rules and all these things. I think we've done a good job, and I do appreciate everyone for coming out and commenting tonight. These are my comments that I have on this particular subject. Number one, this is not something that we just did overnight, or just last week we said, gee, let's put a new development in. I think this has been in the plannings for probably 10 plus years. I've been active in the past 2 years in my part in helping bring this development to town, because I think it's something that we need. My question for Brandon is this the first development that Hall Equities has done? Why don't you come up for just a second, if you could, and I want to have a conversation with you a little bit. Is this the first development that Hall Equities has done?
No, this is, so we're an active development and investment company that's been around for 40 years, and there's a similar project in the city of Turlock that we built, which is a very large retail center, and we've been involved with infrastructure financing. There's been some cleanup and remediation work with that project. We've been through the process. We've been through the development agreement process with the city of Turlock, and it's been very successful. And so, yeah.
Okay, I wanted that question to be very clear, that you're not like what you call the fly-by-night outfit that's coming in and building up a bunch of things and running out of town with all of our money, right? No. Okay. No. All right, that was my main point I wanted to get across.
Yeah. And just to finalize that is, we're in the process of looking through a whole, what I would call the skeleton of the development agreement right now, and it will have everything addressed in it, including the environmental cleanup, the traffic impacts, the whole works. The city will have to agree to that at some point, and we will too, probably within the next couple months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
What I was going to say is that it is to Hall Equities' best interest that Goose Lake and the C Street dump are taken care of. Okay, it is their best interest because they're building houses and places next to these. Okay, and that, from my experience, I've seen transparency from them, I've seen transparency from our staff, and from my fellow commissioners on this. We have discussed it at great lengths many times about every step of this process, and you cannot eliminate any unknown. But what I think is the city has done its homework. I don't take all the comments that we haven't done enough homework, or we haven't done this, or we've put forward, I think, a great effort to make sure that the community has been involved and that we have a product that we can live with for many, many, many years to come. And so I feel comfortable with it. In some of these situations, I think Hall Equities is the reason that we're cleaning up Goose Lake, and the reason that we're going to be approaching the C Street dump site is because of them, not in spite of them. I think that these sites will probably get cleaned up a lot faster because we're looking at a development coming in around them than if we weren't. If we weren't, where's the money? How are we going to, who's going to, I mean, Goose Lake's been there for whatever, 30 years, and we've been trying to get it done, but I think this is actually the answer, not to the problem, not contrary to the problem. So that is my opinion. I do know there's a lot of people that want jobs. There's a lot of people that needs income, and that if not Hall Equities and if not Shelton Hills, then who's starting business and who's going to give people jobs? I mean, we need jobs. We need good, solid places for our young people to work, and I think it's a good project. And yeah, there will be obviously debates about this in the future, and I can trust you that my fellow commissioners are, as I am, very concerned that we do things right and legal. But I read the document, I did read it, and I saw many, many, many areas in there where it talks about, in our negotiations with the Department of Ecology, according to SEPA rules, this needs to be done. According to this, it needs to be done. According to this, and I'll guarantee you, as mayor of the city of Shelton, I can guarantee you cannot make everybody happy with what you decide to do, and that you can't please everybody. But I do look at the majority of the people that live inside the city limits of Shelton, and I think this is a good deal. It's a good deal for Shelton, and I do feel comfortable with having a first reading on this. Okay? It doesn't end any of these discussions. Without your passion and your discussions, we would not be driven to make sure we dot the I's and cross the T's. So that's my opinion on it, and that's what I think the city of Shelton wants and needs for its citizens. So, having said that, we've all talked about it. Everybody has talked about it quite a bit, about an hour and a half or so. Are we ready to have a first reading on this ordinance?
I'm not ready to put it on the consent agenda next week.
Okay.
I would feel more comfortable looking at it again when the development agreement is in front of us.
Okay. So, at this point, it appears that we have two commissioners that do not want to have a first reading at this meeting. And what we will do is we will take this back and we will read and we will talk and we will concentrate and we will renegotiate and we'll do all of those things. And so at this point we will not have a first reading. I think we probably ought to have a motion stating that.
Just don't do it if you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Just don't do it. Well, then we don't need a motion,
May
I guess.
I make one more comment?
Sure, absolutely.
I would just like to say that I think this development is one of the best things that could happen for Shelton. I do have concerns over some of the environmental issues, but my hesitation is based primarily on making sure that we do the best that we can for the safety of our community.
Okay. So we are not going to have a first reading.
Your Honor, just
sure.
You've just made an assumption that two commissioners don't want to have a first reading.
Next meeting, or tonight.
I didn't hear that. I
Okay.
heard that Mike had another issue. Tracy didn't want to have a first reading. You wanted to have a first reading, but I haven't. Maybe Mike does or doesn't want to have a first meeting.
Can they
Just
be
doesn't want to have it. Just doesn't want to have it on the consent agenda next week. That's a different thing than not having a first reading.
All right. Forgive me for that then. Do you feel comfortable having a first reading on this tonight? That would be the question.
I would support that.
You would support that. Okay? Forgive me for the mental break, but it appears that we do have a consensus to have this first reading on this at this time. So, could we please have the first reading of this ordinance?
Ordinance number 1845-0214, first reading. An ordinance of the City of Shelton, Washington, establishing the Shelton Hills Planned Action pursuant to the State Environmental Policy Act.
Forgive me. I made a mistake. We needed to close this hearing first. Point of order. I have now closed the public hearing, and now could we please have a first reading?
Ordinance number 1845-0214, first reading. An ordinance of the City of Shelton, Washington, establishing the Shelton Hills Planned Action pursuant to the State Environmental Policy Act.
Okay. This will be placed under old business for February 24th, 2014, or this will be placed actually, under old business February 24th. Thank you. Thank you for your input. Next on the agenda is an old business item, and it's involving an established memorial policy, and a briefing will be presented by Doug Clark. Greg Clark.
We'll let maybe the people exit here. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through the details. We did that last week. Before you is a policy generating document, which is actually a resolution which will give the city administrator the ability to set the policy and procedure for memorials. The draft policy and procedure document that's attached is really a draft policy. Commissioner Olson had a couple comments with regard to section 4.2 and also section 5.32 with regard to right-of-way permits. This particular resolution, like I say, it gives the city administrator the ability to come up with this policy and procedure that's in alignment with the guidelines of the resolution, which is to define the purpose of a temporary and long-term memorial and identify the departments that will administer those, and then, of course, to set the policy guidelines in conjunction. In short, for those that weren't here last week, a temporary memorial or a short-term memorial is something that is kind of done immediately after some family member has passed and there's a grieving process going on, is something that would last up to 30 days to allow the family to grieve. And then at that point, it needs to be taken down and closed. And then if the family desires to move forward with a long-term memorial, they can do that. There's a number of different options that are available. And I think it really is open-ended, because if somebody wanted to do something, for example, like an art type of memorial, it would just go through the city's approval process to get that. Would go through the Arts Commission and other generated bodies to review and approve the location and the type and the style that would have to meet those guidelines. So with that, I'll just stop.
Okay. This is a public comment action. If anyone from the public would like to speak to this, now would be your opportunity. Yes, please sign your name and address right here. I think we might have to take a motion to extend the 2-hour meeting to the 3-hour. See how good I am on that? Huh?
Yes, it's
Don't
here
need
somewhere.
phone numbers, previous landlords, none of that stuff. All right, Mr. Cooper.
All right, thank you very much, Commission. I'm Forrest Cooper, 409 West Railroad, and I'd like to comment on the memorial ordinance. I'm trying to understand this a little bit. Greg just kind of summed some stuff up that this would give the ability to come up with the ordinance. So my statement might seem kind of odd. Anyways, I strongly encourage the City Commission to look further into the pros and cons of the memorial ordinance before passing it. It is my opinion it's unacceptable for an ordinance such as this to be presented and approved within 1 week time with no or limited input from citizens and businesses impacted by such ordinance. During last week's study session, the first time this came up, I offered input to help mold this ordinance into a positive one that could benefit all. To summarize a few points of my statement, we need to look at the reasons many temporary memorials stay around. Many families don't have a place to grieve, such as a memorial park, and can't afford a plot. This is what happened at First and Railroad. The place of the tragedy becomes the plot. We do not need to create an ordinance that makes it easy for anyone to be immortalized anywhere within the city limits with no regard to impacts on businesses and our citizens. The process for long-term memorials and statues on citizens, so as to not have reminders of violent deaths welcoming others to our town. I know this might sound insensitive, however, I have personal experience with this issue. My best friend was killed in a car accident in 2007, and I worked closely with the Shelton Memorial Park over a year as I designed and constructed a fitting tribute to my friend in the park. To accommodate families who need to grieve and can't afford a plot or might have had a loved one's remains cremated and scattered but still need to grieve, I would suggest sectioning a portion of the memorial park where families could erect memorials for a period of 13 months, max. This would allow the families to heal through the seasons and overcome the hurdle of the 1-year anniversary. After this time, the memorial would be removed. As for temporary roadside memorials, they should be removed after 30 days, period. Please remember, the place of healing is not the place of death. Memorial parks exist for a reason. That's where the artwork and memorials get built and displayed to honor people, unless they were very contributing members of our town or city, or like I said before, a past mayor or somebody who did a lot of good stuff. So memorial parks exist for a reason. Please don't turn our entire city into one, including our main street, without considering the impacts. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you. Next, Mr. Davis. First, before you speak, Tom, I think we're going to entertain a motion to extend the 2-hour meeting limit to an additional hour, and I guess we would need a motion on that.
I move that we extend tonight's meeting for 1 additional hour.
I would second that.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, Mr. Davis, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I think that temporary memorial is inappropriate at best for a number of reasons. You have, there's no confined area. I would agree with Forrest on this. Let me just back up a little bit. And a couple of 3 years ago, there was a forest worker who was accidentally shot in a hunting accident, I think you recall. And there was a candlelight vigil over here at the park, and it was very moving. And there was a collection taken, and there were a lot of people taken, and there were nice things said, and it was appropriate and it was dignified. People walking by temporary memorials scattered throughout the city, if that would be the case, is unreasonable. There's a place and a time for grieving. It's really not a public event, it's a private event. It's probably the most private event you can have in your life. To have a venue for it, that you can exercise that grief in public if you care to do so, and to memorialize that person with words is for the people who come who cared about that person is very appropriate. But to go beyond that is, it's a little tacky, is where I'm going with this. It's just not something you really want to see in the city. As I said, it's a personal grievance, a grieving. And I'm trying to avoid saying that it's not a very good idea from a commercial standpoint, from a tourist standpoint, from a pedestrian standpoint, and almost any other standpoint also, but that's secondary. I just think that common sense should prevail here, and it'd be more dignified if you had a particular area where people could express their grief during that time if they wish to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That was the public comment on that, and I would invite my fellow commissioners, if they had something they would like to say, to feel free that now would be the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of, I mean, I've lived here 35 years, and that was the first time I'd seen a temporary public memorial in the city of Shelton. So I'm not so sure that we need to go through all this for something that happens very occasionally. I kind of agree that I think that, I already said how I felt about having to get a right-of-way permit, and, I can see it now, the headlines, the guy doesn't pull a right-of-way permit, City of Shelton rips down memorial, So I just kind of think that I kind of agree with Tom that it's really not, I don't think we need an ordinance. I think that if these things occur, within a few days, you can do your best to contact the family and say, hey, look, you can't have this here. It's a public nuisance, or whatever, how you want to word it. The long-term memorial is no big deal. I think we have enough policy in place already to establish something in a park or a public right-of-way. Same thing, you got to put a permit in. So I just think it's kind of an unnecessary movement to even do this.
Okay.
Well,
Commissioner Moore?
It was my understanding that we needed to have this ordinance not to promote short-term memorials, but to have an avenue to monitor them so that we could move them. That was my understanding.
Mine also.
So in that case, I mean, if we have to have one in order to not have the long-term effects of a short-term memorial that goes up wherever and stays. And we don't have an avenue other than appealing to the family members or the grieving friends. I think we have to have it.
And I agree with both my fellow commissioners all the way around on this stuff. I think what it does, what you're proposing here is it says that the administrator, he is the one that can set the policies and procedures to approve and install both temporary and long-term memorials. It's really up to the administrator to fine-tune this thing. And I think we need something, because temporary, if you don't have anything in writing, someone puts up a temporary memorial and they want to continue it for many, many, you have to have a policy that says, hey, we have this other mechanism for memorial, but this temporary one, we have to take it down. So that's my understanding. We haven't written any policy. We just said that the city administrator gets the task of putting this wonderful thing together, which we all seem to be fairly not exactly together on, but at least, see, he could put together a policy that didn't say much of anything, I suppose. And, seeing as how we have a varied, when it started out, it sounded like a good idea, and I was going, oh, wait a second, we got all kinds of questions. Did you want to speak to this, Mr. Administrator?
Sure, yeah. I wouldn't call a family, I'd have Greg do that, but...
Sub that one out.
There's the challenge that you have, of course, is that you have this tragic event happen, and people do it, and it's kind of spontaneous, and do you as a public policy want to go out and just yank it down or get into a dispute with the family? And I think that's what we were conflicted with when we went through this before. At some point it has to come to an end, and that's what we're trying to do is put a timeline around it. The other, as to long-term memorials, those already exist. In fact, there's quite a number of them that are around town. They're pretty non-intrusive. I think most people don't realize that they're even there. My own view is that to the extent that you're going to do it, that theme ought to continue, or it ought to add something rather than it shouldn't look like a gravesite, or it shouldn't look that much like a memorial. It should, if it's art, for instance, which is something I think that the family, the most recent tragedy, thought about doing. I think it could enhance any rate. So we've taken a shot at it. If the commissioners, if your preference would be to not do this, why we will gladly. I know Greg would gladly move on to something else, and we will too. And hopefully it'll be a long time until we have to face it again. But we're just trying to put some brackets around a problem that's eventually is going to happen another time. So
I think it's been dumped in your lap, Dave.
Well, so we have an opportunity to have something that at least has an ordinance that has a rule on, especially on the temporary memorials, okay? I would hate to throw it away. Greg's put a lot of work into this. I don't think the final words, are here, but I would support having this resolution passed so we could have an ordinance that defines the rule on that. So I would entertain a motion to put that out.
But Your Honor, just one more thing. Forgive me. I think for the record, it's an important distinction. We've talked both in terms of resolutions and in terms of ordinances. Ordinances are a matter of law.
Resolution.
And this is just a resolution. This is just what we already have laws that allow us to regulate what happens to our streets and right-of-ways and that sort of thing. And then we're charged as staff with overseeing that.
Okay.
And so it's not an ordinance, as has been said. It's not going to make it into our code book. It's just a statement from the commission that we want you to manage this, and that's all it is.
All right.
If you want to outlaw it, that would be an ordinance, and we would need to come back.
Don't think we want to outlaw.
Okay.
So, do we have any motion?
I'm not really sure how to make this motion. Okay, I move that we have a reading of the resolution and adopt it. That was wrong.
Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Do you want to read it? Sure. Go ahead and read it.
Resolution number 1061-0214, a resolution of the City of Shelton, Washington, establishing a policy for long-term memorial.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so the resolution passes. Thank you. All right, moving right along to our other 16 items. Then we have to make a motion to extend this to a 4-hour meeting. No, not really. We have Mike Michael. Wake up. You're on.
I'm awake.
Next. You're next.
I'm awake. I'll make mine quick.
Okay.
Basically, what you have before you, thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. What we have before you this evening is actually a little bit more formal version of what we presented last week regarding some budgetary needs for general engineering services. As we recall from our discussion last week, as part of the 2013 Design and Construction Standards update, the Commission directed us on a slight change in policy, particularly regarding to infill lots within the community. As part of that, the staff is now responsible for providing the engineering of the sidewalk portion of those frontage improvements, so that they will be consistent over time and actually start getting completed. Back in October-ish, when we were discussing this, we provided an estimate of about $3,000 to $5,000 per lot, at least initially, for the survey services that would be required for that. That's something we do not have the capabilities in-house to do, and I have to hire out for. Back in December, we received 2 building permits that were under the new code, the new design and construction standards, as well as the new policy. Just recently got our on-call engineering services contracts in place and was able to go out for a quote on the first survey need there, and received a quote back in line with the original estimates we provided, totaling about $9,500 for the 2 lots that are currently under permit. This evening, basically, we're asking that because there was no budget identified for a professional services line in the general engineering budget for 2014, we're asking that funds for this current request plus an additional amount of funding for 3 future lots that may come in the course of the year be put in that budget line for us to continue providing this service that the Commission asked us to provide. So to that end, basically, we're asking that the Commission authorize the City Administrator to prepare a budget modification to cover this new ongoing engineering services need.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this action item? Seeing none coming forward, I'd invite my fellow Commissioners to provide their comments or ask their questions at this time.
I think it's great that this is finally going to get a chance to be seen in the public, that the city is stepping up and spending money on something they own, and that to show the builders that you don't have to pay the whole cost of sidewalk improvements. Should be a win to them. They don't have to spend as much money.
Commissioner Moore, did you have any comment?
No,
okay.
I don't.
All right. Well, I have no comments at this time either. So it appears that we are in agreement to move this forward, and what we'll do is follow staff's recommendation for the Commission to authorize the City Administrator to prepare a budget modification to cover the new ongoing engineering services expense. Very good. Do we need to read anything? A motion?
No.
We need a motion? Okay.
Okay, I move that we authorize the City Administrator to prepare a budget modification to cover this new ongoing engineering services expense.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, Poverty Task Force. There's a new business item here, and that is going to be a fairly lengthy report by Mr. Steve Goins.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Briefly, in a form of background, earlier last year, the city established a poverty task force. This was mainly focused on looking at data, collecting facts to help arrive at recommendations that would reduce the impacts of poverty on our community, not just Shelton, but the area, and particularly in our businesses. That committee was established and did prepare a report, which was provided in some detail to the Commission on, I believe that was December 13th of last year. Shortly after that, the Commission held a retreat where we discussed the Poverty Task Force report and recommendations in a bit of detail. There was some concerns over the cost of implementation and questions that staff and the Commission had a back and forth on. The outcome of that meeting was to come back with some recommendations on implementation of the report and its recommendations, which is, in summary, what I have for you tonight. The report is, it is lengthy. I'll try to, in the interest of time, summarize this as quickly as I can. As I stated in my staff report, in looking at all of the recommendations, and there were a number, there seemed to be sort of three groups of recommendations in terms of how they could be implemented. Some were seemingly directed toward the Commission and elected officials as a way to promote the outcome of these recommendations and to keep this in front of all of our vision as an ongoing goal. There was a recommendation to establish at least one committee, and I'll discuss that in more detail, but this committee could be charged with making recommendations and furthering a number of the recommendations that were included in the Poverty Task Force report. And then there were a number of recommendations where it really wasn't clear who was responsible for those and how those would be implemented. What staff has done is tried to identify a path to address all of the recommendations. And I should mention this in the, I believe it's 6, I misnumbered them. I think I numbered 5 twice here in my staff report. There's 6 really key recommendations here, and within that umbrella of 6 recommendations, all of the recommendations within the Poverty Task Force report are addressed in some manner. I think that's important for you to know. I didn't leave out a recommendation in the process of making a recommendation to you. All of them are addressed in some fashion. It's further understood that it's likely what I'm envisioning here, my crystal ball was a little unclear on what I thought exactly the Commission would want to support. So it's sort of built into this that you might want to go a different direction. An example of that is how the Poverty Task Force that I'll discuss in a moment could be structured and how they would work. But in summary, one of the important outcomes of the discussion and recommendations from the Poverty Task Force was to have the elected officials as champions of furthering these efforts in general. That there was a lot of importance in ensuring that not just the City Commission, but other elected officials were aware of these concerns and were working towards solutions. And that sort of led to this first recommendation, which I'll just read here. The city, particularly its elected officials, can provide leadership in forwarding the task force recommendations and providing opportunities to create partnerships with various agencies and organizations working toward mutual objectives. In addition, the city leaders can use their position and influence to seek financial and other assistance in implementing these recommendations through conversations with other county, state, and federal representatives. And as I go on to state, I believe this is happening now. It's already occurring. I think that the task force charge was to make the Commission aware that there was an expectation that the city would take a leadership role in these outcomes, and that representation would not just occur one time or just be something that a box would be checked, but it would be ongoing. In terms of the recommendations, there was a lot of support for our youth in our community, particularly youth and veterans, I think were mentioned, and that sort of leads to my second and third recommendations, that the city would support efforts by youth empowerment strategies, or yes, in their proposal to Mason County to use the old St. Edward's Rectory as a center for serving youth at risk. And in my discussions, I provide some justification for that recommendation. This organization has a lot of value in trying to turn the lives around of youth who may be a little misdirected presently, and it's certainly very lacking in our community now. Having this facility in town would undoubtedly benefit our local youth, and for those reasons alone, it was viewed as something that would be very valuable to support. And number 3 sort of parallels that, to partner and provide city support to local organizations such as Host Yes, Mason County Authority, Mason Matters, and other organizations, businesses interested in bringing youth-related activities to Shelton. There was a fair amount of testimony provided during the course of gathering this data about the crisis that our youth are in. The numbers and the stats were pretty sobering, and we believe this is a good place to start to turn things around long-term for our community as a whole. Focusing on the youth can pay dividends for decades, and providing opportunities for them to have after-school activities that are wholesome. And one of the reoccurring themes in the report was to restore hope, and in a way, this is one measure of doing that. Restore hope in the youth of our community that the city cares and that we're concerned about their future, and providing support for these organizations that would bring these activities and other things to town would be certainly a positive way to do that. That was item number 3. Safety was another concern that was brought up a number of times during the course of data gathering. And number 4 addresses this, to direct the police and public works departments to re-illuminate existing street lights that have been turned off in recent years, and evaluate current lighting conditions within alleys in the downtown, and consider whether additional alley lighting should be pursued. A number of the recommendations that were included in the report, were I guess it's certainly an expectation and a belief that some of these recommendations could be implemented very inexpensively and very quickly. Staff's and some agreement in that respect on this particular one. On one hand, I think it would be pretty easy for this coordination effort to occur to determine if there are lights that were turned off downtown, turning those back on, and as a separate item to evaluate the lighting in some of our alleyways and try to improve some of the safety and at least the perception of safety in the downtown. Not a monumental effort. It's focused on a pretty finite area of our downtown. In terms of cost, there are programs that can help fund these kind of things through grants or through using LED lighting for energy savings. In fact, this might even save the city money over time. Who knows? Certainly seen as a valuable element to the outcome here. Number 5 was sort of a cornerstone of staff's recommendation, and this was a recommendation that was contained in the report, to establish a city poverty committee that would work in conjunction with local leadership to address the viability of the report recommendations, develop and recommend a strategic plan for implementation. Staff's layout of how this could occur, as it's in the staff report, would be to establish a committee of approximately 5 to 7 members that would meet twice a month, allow them to get underway and get some work done. The belief that meeting once a month probably wouldn't be adequate to really make a lot of headway in the near term, but to begin to utilize their time to develop a strategic report while addressing or assessing their priorities, and coming back periodically to the commission and reporting on progress in these areas and keeping the issues and the successes in front of the public's mind. What staff has further laid out here is an array of the recommendations could be under the charge of this committee, and that was a mechanism we felt would be valuable in really helping to implement what the vision of the Poverty Task Force was, and those are listed there in the bullet form. I won't read all those individually. Some of those were considered more valuable and immediate than others, and as an example, I provided as an attachment the Downtown Ambassador Program overview that is in place in Olympia. There was a lot of discussion over establishing an ambassador program in Shelton and what that might look like. And at the end of the day, the Poverty Task Force didn't want to take it upon itself to figure out exactly how that should occur, who should pay for what, and how that should be structured. But staff's belief is this committee would be ideal for doing just that, and could bring back a recommendation to the commission, including what those costs might be. Our belief is that it's a public partnership that would have to be the outcome, much like Olympia has, and they could talk to the community and get a lot more detail than the Poverty Task Force had time to collect, and come up with a solid plan that would have a lot of public support. We think the public support alone is probably worth the value of taking a little extra time to have the committee work on this. But I think if you want to succeed, it's going to have to be in a partnership with the community at large, including the business community downtown. So in terms of the cost for this, there's a lot of unknowns, in part because we don't know what the committee is going to recommend and what format that would look like. In terms of staff time, I guess the way I looked at this is, assuming that the Shelton Hills project moves ahead in the coming months, I think there'll be some difficult decisions in terms of staff's priorities. The good news is we'd have this large development that would probably bring in revenue to the city and allow us some different options to have. If Shelton Hills is stalled for some reason, we probably would have a lot more internal time at a staff level to invest in this committee and the efforts that they're putting on. So either way, we think there's an opportunity there for staff to help out and make this a reality. What we stopped short of is recommending that the second committee that was proposed be adopted at this time, or be established at this time. That gets me to near the end here. The last recommendation was regarding a second task force. This was discussed in the over the course of 2 or 3 meetings when the recommendations were being considered as a way to evaluate what the hindrances are to real economic development in Shelton and how to address those concerns. Staff has a recommendation here on how to establish a committee or a task force to do that, but I've stated the reasons why I believe that might not be something that we should look at immediately, and staff's recommendation would be to deter that effort. Staff believes that, for one, if the Shelton Hills development begins to occur, there might be a different perspective on what's hindering the economic development, and maybe the opportunity that brings might change things in itself. The economy is improving, and watching the economy change and improve over time might bring some results to Shelton that might change the answer that we receive. I also mentioned that there's a downtown visioning process that we've discussed that would likely, in some indirect manner, start to address these questions in terms of making our downtown more attractive for development. That certainly is something I think would be a consideration as part of the reasoning. So given all those reasons, staff's recommendation is to support that, but to delay it for a period of time, maybe a year, maybe longer. The last part of the report cites some lingering recommendations that haven't been yet identified, and that's because staff's belief was that these particular recommendations are best handled by the different social providers and other organizations that are involved in improving the lives of those in poverty and in the community. This work is already underway, in fact. I know that United Way and others are looking into some of the ways they can better coordinate services, and rather than trying to step in the middle of that and direct traffic, we think that the city should simply get out of the way and allow them the opportunity to improve their own services and just make incremental changes over time as they see fit. That concludes my report.
Okay. I'd invite my fellow commissioners for any comments or questions they might have at this time. We usually go to ladies first. You can always, you can make comments after we talk too if you wanted to, I don't care.
I know that we're working on this, and I know that you've put a lot of effort into this. And also, I have heard that there has been some frustration with the slow pace that we're moving, but it's a big issue, and I think we are making progress.
Comments, questions?
Yeah, I was just reading this letter that David submitted, and I think these are both great things to move on fairly quickly. The light issue and that if they're turned off lights to turn them on, that doesn't seem like a real tough thing to do. And we've been talking about dumpster diving for months, so maybe we could bring that up and get something talking about it.
Did you want to come forward and talk about your letter a little? Why don't you come up? We're having fun. We're only into our 5th hour. Just kidding.
I'm James Salzer. I live at 427 South 16th in Shelton, and I served as a member of the Poverty Task Force. On December 13th, the City Commission received our report on the deliberations of our task force activity. I recently received a copy of the staff recommendation that Steve read, which appeared to be a recap of our final report. What's missing for me is now some 2 months after our final report, is any sense of the quality of support or an opinion from the Commission about the validity of the work we did. One of our key recommendations was that the city embrace a process to keep the momentum of the task force moving forward. That recommendation does appear in Steve's review. My request is that you put an action face on the task force conclusions ahead of any further deliberations by another committee. I have a couple suggestions to show your good faith effort in that regard. Turn back on all of the street lights that you turned off some time ago and initiate a plan to secure all of the dumpsters in the alleys in the downtown core. For my ego as a task force member, I need you to show that you believe in this and support the work we did and the conclusions we reached. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I will comment to that, and I apologize to you and your task force members for not probably studying this more and being in communication with you on the streets more and recognizing that you did a phenomenal job in a very short amount of time. And not to excuse myself, but you attend 20-plus meetings a month or so, and you get embroiled in the activities of everything that's going on. My basic idea was waiting for this to come through, knowing that Steve has got, again, 600 things on his plate, and knowing that this was coming, I pretty much put it all on the back burner. But I would say that Commissioner Olson said a couple of things. I have been very, very supportive of trying to figure out an answer to the dumpster diving experience. Not to hinder anyone that doesn't have anything from getting something. It's just, there are other avenues, I think, which are better probably for our community. So I would support or entertain some motions or some policy that would either lock up dumpsters or move them or light them or whatever, or to prohibit dumpster diving. That would be my position on that. The lights, I think we've added a bunch of LED lights, so maybe the power savings can offset that, so maybe we could turn on more lights. So this is part of that conversation. So I thank you for your letter, and we have this. I took this out of my packet, not to be shredded, but for me to take back and to kind of mull over a little bit. And so I don't know exactly how my fellow commissioners feel about those two issues, but I probably would say that I would like to see something that we could possibly move, if we can do it together, on those two issues. So that's my comments at the moment. So, but what you're asking for is
If I could interrupt, I wasn't anticipating a action as an outcome for tonight.
Just old business.
But to bring this back under old business, it would give you some time to contemplate what staff has proposed. Just as an example, staff, I anticipated that there might be some division over what the Poverty Committee would take on. This commission might have their own priorities that they want them to look at, or they might want to take something out of their list of to-dos, if you will, and take that on yourselves. Those are things that I thought would be refined as a follow-up for next week's meeting.
Any other questions or comments?
Public comment?
Yeah, Marilyn, you can come up and speak 3 minutes on that if you want.
Marilyn Vogler, 420 East Poplar. One of the hidden gems that I found in Steve's staff report was in a task assigned to the committee we've heard about. That is, to evaluate and comment on pending city decisions having potential adverse effects on those in poverty. I'd like to see you change the wording of this a little bit to get an evaluation and comment on the impact of pending city decisions on those in poverty, to allow for both positive and negative effects. In a similar way that the staff report that we just heard about ended with a little section called Budget and Fiscal Information. Fiscal impacts associated with the proposal are not clearly determinate. So what are the impacts of those things you consider doing on people who are in poverty? I wouldn't have understood that the changes you made about who paid for sidewalk improvements might have a potential beneficial impact. Last I heard, the Habitat for Humanity project that had been kind of put on hold for low-income housing might be revived, because now the cost of putting in those improvements wasn't as great. I don't know where this is now, but that's an example. And how better to put yourselves in a position to be champions of the sense of the recommendations that the committee, that the task force made, than for you to know, as you make decisions on all kinds of things, what the impact of those decisions is likely to be on members of our community who are living in poverty. I hope you'll go through with this. I hope you don't wait for the committee. I hope if you've got something coming before you, you consult with Community Lifeline, with members of the task force, with people who would have reason to know what your actions are impacting. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. All right. Well, we can't, Tom, I just can't. When am I going to cut these? Everyone's speaking 9 minutes each. I mean, we got 20 minutes to finish it. We still have a page and a half of business to do. So, I mean, at some point I got to cut this stuff off. So, can you just speak from there? Can you yell out a 30-second rebuttal?
We can't get them on the record.
Come on up, Tom. How many minutes you want tonight there?
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, when you allow someone to speak, you have to allow
okay, I got you.
speak. I'm sorry.
Forgive me.
Yeah, just 2 points. One, I was always afraid that you would slam the door shut on the Dipsy dumpsters there, and that would be the first course of action. I think obviously there's a larger issue there. That was the recommendation by the chamber. I thought it was lacked a little passion, a little understanding, without some sort of alternative to access to the items that were in the Dipsy dumpster. So before you lock it up, maybe you want to take a look at a little bit of a larger picture, how we could mitigate the negative impacts of cutting off the small amount of material items that are available to people who don't have them. I mean, let's think a little bit outside ourselves here. The second thing, and the only other thing I have is, I don't know why any poverty committee or any other task force should hinge on what's going to happen in the Shelton Hills development. It's a 20-year project, for crying out loud. It'll be 10 years before the first house is built. It's going to be 10 years before it actually impacts the city in terms of more residences. I think you should just go ahead and move forward with it like everybody would like you to. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. Next on our agenda is a Basin 5 acceptance. Mike Michaels.
Mayor, Commissioners, I'll try and make this one really short too, just hit the
Good
high points
for you,
here.
young man.
This is the final step for the commission so we can close this project out. Nearly 2 years of, a little over 2 years of work. We have the Basin 5 construction complete last December. As of the beginning of the month, I have a memo from my project engineer saying all the contractual obligations are done. So we're in front of the commission doing the last step we have to do before we can actually get everything back from the state and give them their last little piece of money here. So just a quick recap, we opened bids on April 26th of 2011 for about 40,000 lineal feet of sewer main rehabilitation up in the Basin 5 area. And for those who are not aware, Basin 5 is essentially the east half of everything on the hill on the south side of town. Those 5 bids ranged from roughly $8.5 to $10.5 million. There was actually an error in the low bid that was adjusted to $9,620,838.97 and roughly $10.5 million on the top end. Engineers' probable cost range was $11.8 to $13 million at that time. Buno Construction was the successful bidder with the $9.6 million bid. We did issue 16 change orders over the 2 years of work for a total of $1,568,024.50. Final total contract was $11,188,863.47. We had Public Works and USDA money on this, Public Works Trust Fund, I should say. And in the end of the $11 million contract we had, we only spent $8.4 million because of cost savings and efficiencies that the contractor was able to provide us. At this point, the final step is for the commission to accept the project so that we can ask the state agencies for final release from them and release $409,422.75 in retained funds back to the contractor. And at this time, we're asking that the commission place this on the consent agenda for next Monday.
Following the schedule here, we do have, this is an action item, so we, public comment on this action item, seeing there's no one left in the audience. Is there anyone who wants to talk? No? I didn't have to have that? Oh, no. That shows my notes. I was probably reading the notes of the one before, but I'm getting there. Long time since I've had these 3-hour meetings. They're just a little draining. Forgive me on that. Oh, yes, there we are, Basin 5, right down there. Do my fellow commissioners have anything they'd like to ask Mike Michaels about? Questions or comments at this time?
Glad it's done.
Glad it's done?
On to the next one.
There we go.
There won't be a next one.
All right. Yes, Mr. Clark.
I just have a kind of breaking news from the weekend. We had this large rainstorm, which typically would have brought flows into the plant of about in the neighborhood of 12 million gallons a day. We had 6.5 million gallons a day. And it's because of these I&I projects we've been completing, they're actually working.
Good. Very good report. Okay, then if there's no further questions or comments about this issue, we would like to, I think we would follow your recommendation, place this on the consent agenda for February 24th, 2014. And now another item. We have a strategic plan update by Mr. Dave O'Leary.
Strategic plan was approved, that we're working with now, was approved in early in 2013. It includes the most significant things that we want to do as a city. in addition to the mission, vision, values, it also lays out what we're going to do in order to achieve those. Every year, by custom, we revisit and potentially update the strategic plan, and that's generally done in a retreat, which was the case when we talked about this in our January retreat last month. Typically that's done at the end of the year, but we had a new commissioner, and so it made sense to carry that over and have all the commissioners look at it and bring it back before you. The proposed amendments are shown in the attachment to the staff report. The commissioners may, at this meeting, accept or reject any of the preliminary decisions that were proposed at the retreat. And then as soon as the commission approves the changes, the updates, then staff will republish the strategic plan without the strikeouts and underlines and that sort of thing. And staff recommends that the commission approve it as amended, which are a reflection of the discussion at the retreat. That concludes staff's report.
Questions or comments?
That's also scheduled for action on the 24th, Your Honor.
Discuss some action. Questions or comments?
Well, it seems like it's just as we spoke about it and discussed it, everything's there.
And I'll put that on the consent too, if that's, you're okay with that. So.
Okay. All right, looks good to me. So we'll follow your recommendation to place this on the consent agenda for February 24th, 2014. Last item before final items is a Hotel and Motel Tax Advisory Committee reappointment, and Management Assistant Vicki Look will present that to us this evening, or tomorrow morning, whenever she gets, if we're still here.
Actually, I had brought the appointments for the 2014 year to you, and we had, you did reappoint 2 motel members of the advisory committee, and Dwayne Wilson from Christmastown, Kiwanis. Annette McGee has submitted her letter and said that she would be proud and happy to serve for 2014 on the Tax Advisory Committee. And so staff is recommending that the commission appoint her for this term.
Any questions or comments at this time? I serve on that committee, and it's a joy. All right, so I believe the commission concurs that we will make a reappointment of Annette McGee to the City of Shelton Hotel Motel Advisory Committee and place it on the consent agenda for 2014, February 24th. Very good. And now, an administration report.
Your Honor,
Very good.
Said enough already.
Anyone else? General public comment? No, Marilyn, you can't. 9 minutes, you're cut off. All right. Very good. Thank you. You did a good job. Administration final touches?
Touches. On the purple sheet, Your Honor.
Very good. And our next meeting will be February 24th, 2014 at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.